if we don't have the same sense of urgency around a specific issue, if we're not aligned on what our mission and our vision are, we may not see things the same way. And if we don't see them the same way, we're not going to have the same level of understanding. And if we don't have the same level of understanding, we're certainly not going to have the same level of value to see how this needs to be prioritized or not. And as a result, it's about leveling the playing field, having shared language with shared meaning, and getting people kind of preaching from the same hymnal. And that work, once done, speeds the process up of everything. The other side of that, and this is really important, is asking for and being open to both giving and receiving feedback. Because the better the feedback loop, the quicker the course corrects itself.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Terry Bean. Terry is a business coach, speaker, and strategist who's all about helping leaders grow their influence by becoming more relatable, more intentional, and more impactful. He's delivered over 250 presentations for organizations like FedEx, Ford, and Comcast, and he's a 5-time TEDx speaker with a gift for making big ideas both practical and personal. He's also the author of 2 books and the creator of the Relatability Factor, a framework that's transforming how professionals connect to themselves, their vision, and the people they serve. With more than 15 years of coaching experience, Terry works with founders, executives, and high-performing teams to improve communication, clarify purpose, and build real momentum. His approach blends mindset mastery, human connection, and strategic execution to create lasting growth. Oh, and just for fun, he once received the Presidential Volunteer Service Award from President Obama. Congrats on your gift for making big ideas both practical and personal, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
What a lovely bio. I couldn't have written that better myself. Oh,
imagine that. Yeah. So I'm really excited to have you on the show because in a world where people are trying to rebuild trust that's been broken in business and trying to build these relationships and still trying to move faster than ever, it seems like there's a lot of room for improvement in the way that people go about building that know, like, and trust in their relationships. And so what is the mindset shift you think people need to make in order to build those relationships quicker? What's kind of what you call a relational shortcut, so I've heard.
Yeah, so we'll get into the relational shortcut in a minute, but to answer your first question, and it's literally in the name of your podcast, it's the human connection. And what we do so often is we approach situations, opportunities, people, ideas, whatever it may be, from our perspective. But when we're trying to build relationships, we've got to flip it around, and we've got to approach these things from their perspective. We have to make sure that the people that we're dealing with feel like we're in it for them, not just for us. One of the things that wasn't in my bio, but I did for a solid 14 years, was run a very large networking group here in Detroit called Motor City Connect. And so there were months when I'd hold 14 meetings in a month and watch people interact in real time. And through the years of doing that and the decade I did it for other networking groups prior to launching my own, I really got to watch human interaction as it was happening. And it was fascinating to see who did exceedingly well and who didn't. And I can assure you that those who didn't were the ones that people felt like this was going to be a transactional relationship. They were in it for their good, for their benefit, not for building something collaborative. So there's tip and trick number one. Focus on what you can do for them, what they might be able to do for you, but most importantly, what you can do together.
Yeah, I love that mindset, and it's something that I think a lot of times people, and I've been guilty of this myself, is thinking, okay, what do I need? What do I need? What do I need? What are my goals? And you're very focused on yourself and your problems, and it gets into a very, like I said, that transactional mindset that ends up making it harder to get what you're looking for, because it's so obvious to people that you're just in it for yourself. Whereas if you approach your interactions with, how can I add value? Who can I help? What can I help them with what they're struggling with? Then it comes across as a much more important and valuable interaction, and actually adds to those relationships. And it's when you go into that without expecting any sort of quid pro quo, just giving and knowing that when you give enough, you'll get what you need in return in some way that you can never even predict. Then it's a much more beneficial result for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said.
And so when you mentioned like running some of these groups, and you do all these talks that I mentioned in the bio, what are some of when you're coaching people on these sort of things, what are like some examples of how you've helped people turn around their approach to building these relationships, and what has been some of the results of that?
Yeah, so one of the philosophies that I've used for a very long time is I refer to as after you networking. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We spend so much time worried about how to make a great first impression. What are we going to say to sound smart, to sound likable, to sound fun, to sound interesting? When all we really have to do is flip the script and put the onus on making them sound interesting and allowing them to sound smart. Everybody's got the same favorite topic, and that topic is themselves. So let them get it out. And what happens when you let other people go first, now you have the ability to frame your story and your response in a way that's going to match their worldview, because you already know what their worldview is. You just heard about it. So now you can position yourself more effectively. And the other ancillary benefit that is huge from this approach is the idea that you'll know exactly who they are when it's your turn to speak. If they don't offer you the same level of patience in listening and understanding, you know that you don't really have to invest a lot of future time in that relationship. And if you've been active in building relationships through networking, you end up going to coffees or going to lunches or going to meetings with people that, gosh, if I would have just spent 15 minutes on the phone, I wouldn't have wasted hours and money and energy going to meet this individual somewhere else. So what that results that you asked about, people get their time back, people get their energy back. They get really hyper focused on who's the right people for them to meet. So often people will go to a networking event with the goal of meeting 30 or 40 or 50 people because there's 30 or 40 or 50 people in the room. You don't want everybody in the room. You want to be able to attract the right people and have a conversation with those folks.
And yeah, 100% agree. I think I've talked with a number of people on this show about the way people network is often they're trying to cast too wide a net. Instead, they need to really be focusing on those specific people that are going to be the right fit for them, that understand who they are and share their values, and are going to be able to go deeper in those relationships and the surface level stuff. And so I think it's, and also I think it's something that like the same sort of skills when it's applied to networking also applies to like running a team or working with clients. It's that taking time to really listen to people first and understand where they're coming from. What kind of experience you have when it comes to applying these sort of skills and when it comes to like team environments?
What kind of experience when you in team environments? It's the breakdown in teams is communication, right? And the reason communication breaks down, same thing, is we approach it from our perspective. And we might use words that mean something very specific to us, but don't have that same level of meaning to others. And so inside of our corporate culture, if we're not all using the same language to mean the same things, if we don't have the same sense of urgency around a specific issue, if we're not aligned on what our mission and our vision are, we may not see things the same way. And if we don't see them the same way, we're not going to have the same level of understanding. And if we don't have the same level of understanding, we're certainly not going to have the same level of value to see how this needs to be prioritized or not. And as a result, it's about leveling the playing field, having shared language with shared meaning, and getting people kind of preaching from the same hymnal. And that work, once done, speeds the process up of everything. The other side of that, and this is really important, is asking for and being open to both giving and receiving feedback. Because the better the feedback loop, the quicker the course corrects itself.
Yeah, you mentioned that miscommunication being a huge, or poor communication being a huge issue in teams, and it's I think it's funny how there's so many communication tools and platforms and stuff, and people still are not able to accurately communicate and effectively communicate the message between two people, even like the same office or on the same team. And it's a matter not of necessarily with the tools being used, but the mindset going into it, and the ability to actually listen and not just assume you understand what the other person is saying, but asking those clarifying questions, or doing something like there's a lot of different ways to confirm you heard what they think they were saying. So often people assume that people understood, or they assume they understood what someone said, and it was not accurately communicated. And it's the kind of onus is on both sides of the conversation. Communication is a two-way street there, and so it's not just one person's fault, but it always helps to have that the kind of confirmation, double check. Okay, I'll make sure, like, if you tell me something, I want to, okay, so I heard X, Y, and Z. I understand that you meant X, Y, and Z, not A, B, and C. Is that correct? And then you go, actually, I meant X, Y, and D, not Z. Thank you for clarifying, to make sure, because yeah, they sound the same, but it's not the same piece of information. But just that clarification, that double check, that when you're trying to go like 90,000 miles an hour and faster, and you don't take the time to make these little tiny little double checks to make sure your things are accurate, then tiny little misconceptions or miscommunications or assumptions a lot over time, and made rapidly as things like compound to huge problems. And it's the way to fix it is to get better at the tiny little communication habits of listening and double checking and mirroring back what people said after you've actively listened to them, so that they know that you heard what they said, and you know that their message was received the way they intended it to, not the way that you heard it, because everyone has their own kind of biases and priorities and way of seeing things, and it's way easier for things to get misconstrued than people realize. And it's such a basic skill set that I think is people will say, oh, I'm a great communicator, and it's really, maybe they're a great talker, but not necessarily a great listener and great confirmer that their understanding of what someone else said is correct is often not people don't realize that's part of the communication package, not just I'm good at talking or good at writing or good at creating like video content. It's like you need to have that listening and verification in order to accurately communicate effectively with people. And that's I think it causes a lot of problems in the workplace and just in society, is people not really knowing how to listen and verify.
You couldn't have nailed that any better. And the part about everyone thinks they're a great communicator, I literally have a master's degree, right? So I am a master communicator. And the amount of times I say something that is clear as a bell in my head, but is received very differently by the person I'm communicating to, is definitive proof that communication is super easy to screw up.
And have you found any like, so what's kind of your process for when you're communicating to other people? Like, because I know sometimes like I catch myself saying, does that make sense? Or like asking people to kind of verify like what they thought I said. But there's also like the thing, or if you don't want to come across as coming like not confident in what you said. How do you have any tips on when you're communicating to someone, like to verify that they understand what you said without kind of seeming less confident? What's kind of your approach for that?
I use does that make sense a lot. I really do. And I just finished doing a 4-week public speaking course. And at one point I said, I have a very distinct vocalized pause. I don't say or ah, but I use the word right a lot. And the reason I use the word right is because it's affirming, but it's also my space, right? If I don't know what I'm going to say, I'll use the word right and people will nod and I'll move on. The problem is with does that make sense? Is it's a yes or no answer. And people will take the easy way out and say yes because they don't want to expose their own ignorance. We are very, very cautious about protecting our ego. And as such, we may say yes when the real answer was no. So I will very quickly say, great. Tell me what you understood. Tell me what you heard. Say that back to me in a way that is different than what I said. Because if you just parrot it back, say the exact same words, well, good, your memory's in check. That's awesome. Your hearing works, 2 thumbs up, but that doesn't lead to understanding. That doesn't mean that it landed for you in the way I intended it to. So just getting them to say it back in their words, that way we can verify whether or not they truly got it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that suggestion because, yeah, it's one thing to mirror back what they said. Is another thing. Yeah, like you said, protecting the ego is a big problem, and people will just say, "Oh yeah, I got it," and then they go, "I don't know what it totally just said in their own head," but they outwardly like, "Oh, I totally got it. That makes total sense." But it's that challenge to repeat back or to communicate what I said without just mirroring it is a good double check that you can do from if you're the one communicating a message, to make sure that it's been received properly, because not everyone will be willing to mirror it back or rephrase it to make sure they understand it, because again, they're trying to avoid that, like the protect the ego sort of thing. So I like that if you want to make sure your message is received, asking someone to reframe it in their own words is a good test to make sure you're actually being understood properly. So it's and you mentioned like you do a lot of these presentations. What's kind of like the biggest topic you see that people are like asking for help with lately?
Difficult discussions, having conversations, especially in a corporate environment, people are not willing to engage properly in the difficult discussion. So, and it's because of two reasons. One, a large sect of the population is effectively conflict avoidant, right? They'd rather not be engaged in anything. They'll just go along with it because it's easier. And I'm not saying it's because people are lazy or don't care. I'm just saying that we tend to like the path of least resistance. So that's one side. The other side, and it's a smaller population, but it is a louder population, is kind of in the whole burn the boats. I don't give a rip what you think. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it in a way that makes me feel good without worrying about how it impacts you. Now, I am a huge fan of radical candor. I think radical candor is a great idea, and we should practice it often. But the caveat is we can only practice radical candor if we're practicing radical kindness too. And so that changes things. The other thing that I end up talking about a lot in terms of difficult discussions is you can't control the person you're communicating with. Even if you're writing and signing their checks, you don't have full control on how they're going to show up in that moment. And if you do, it's strictly out of fear. And while fear is a motivator, it's like not the best motivator we have. So the idea being in the difficult discussions piece is you control you. Your attitude, your belief, the choices, the words you use, how you show up, how present you are, how you're going to pay attention, and most importantly, know what your desired outcome from this difficult conversation is. And the quicker you can assert that and insert it into the conversation, then you can align to work together to get to that end goal. So that's a big one. The other big one is leadership. And I spent a lot of time working with leaders and emerging leaders and reminding them that there's no org chart that says you're a leader. Everyone can lead. They just need to step up and do so. And quite frankly, our world is really short on good leaders right now. So please step up.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Terry. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a review, and subscribe. To learn more about myself or Terry, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.